All right, Mr. President, we are now live on YouTube.
All right, super. I call to order the Westlake City Schools Special Board Meeting for Monday, July 20th of 2020. Roll call.
Call to order at 5:07 p.m. Kraft,
Here.
Stoll,
Here.
Fanukin,
Here.
Lazinski,
Here.
Piernot.
Here.
And at this time, if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Treasurer, do you have the opportunity to share a flag with us? Fantastic, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one
One-
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I know a number of us, of course, are in the boardroom tonight. Some of us are remote, which is the reason why some of us are masked up tonight. So thank you, board members, for being here tonight. Thank you for those that are joining us. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Lazinski,
Yes.
Piernot,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We're going to begin the evening with a board discussion regarding district finance. We had a good finance committee meeting not so long ago. And Mr. Treasurer, I know that you've had an opportunity to share a lot with us. You shared some with us at the last board meeting as well. And I believe you're going to share some additional information with us this evening.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to take this off so that you can better see and hear me, hopefully.
Thank you. Thank you.
As we finish the fiscal year, our fiscal year, as a reminder, ends on June 30th. We got a better picture of what our finances for the district look like. Specifically, there was the unknown of our expenditures at the end of the school year and how they would come out with the closure that happened approximately March 17th. So as we started looking at that, we get a better picture of what our long-term financial picture forecast is. And we typically only forecast for on a 5-year basis, but I like to carry it out a little bit farther for information of the board. So the board members should have some data in front of them that shows a projected forecast. This is not a board approved forecast, but this is a projected forecast of what things would look like for this upcoming school year that we're in right now, fiscal year 21, and then going all the way out to fiscal year 2030. One of the opportunities that we have tonight, and it's solely at the discretion of the Board of Education, is we could look to put a levy issue on the ballot for this November 3rd, I believe it is this year, the presidential election. In order to do that, we would have to have 2 resolutions passed and the issue filed with the County Board of Elections by August 5th. So if the board would like to move forward with a levy in November, I would strongly recommend, and I have it in front of the board for your consideration, passing a resolution tonight. Okay, that would be your first resolution. We would then, I would ask the board if this one passes successfully tonight, or if the board even chooses to go forward with it tonight and pass it. We would then look at our next board meeting, July 27th, to pass the second resolution. That'd give me about a week to file with the county. Right now it's on appointment only basis because the building is closed to the public. So I would appreciate having that little bit of a leeway in order to get things filed. The reason that I mentioned that is in those forecasts that I've presented to the board, we have some options for the board to consider, different millage rates. So there's, I think, about 8 attachments that you have in front of you, as well as a 9th showing, again, what we went back in, I think January or February, we started some of these conversations. And we looked at what a mill costs, not only a $100,000 home, which is traditionally how you might price an issue. So we know that for every 1 mil of taxes levied, it costs a homeowner annually $35 for every $100,000 of their property value, their market value. Here in Westlake, we know our average home sale price last year was around $286,000, somewhere in that nature. So when we carry that $35 out, it really comes out to being almost exactly $100 per year per mil for the average residential property in Westlake City School District. So again, this is information for you to think about. I'm going to jump back real quick and talk a little bit about what a forecast would look like. Now, again, legally, we don't have to pass a resolution for our forecast. It was traditionally in October. They've moved that now to the end of November. So we would have to pass it either in October or November of this year, depending on when we choose to do that. But some of the things that played into our financial picture ending a little bit better than we had anticipated, last year, is we had a significantly higher than anticipated revenue coming in on property taxes. I think some of that played into some new construction and major renovations as property values go up due to new construction or a major renovation, not simply due to a reappraisal or just normal increases in property values. But when it's specifically with new construction or a major renovation, that's new tax revenue that the district is able to receive. Additionally, we did see last year was the reappraisal. So we do have some inside millage. It's around 5.8 mils. Inside millage is not subject to that automatic reduction factor of House Bill 920 from the 1970s. So as your property value goes up, that millage stays the same of 5.8 mils. It does not decrease like your other property mills or other levies that we have on the tax duplicate. And then finally, I think we saw some delinquent taxes from previous years paid that brought our tax revenue in a little higher than anticipated. Furthermore, we've talked about it throughout the past couple of years. We have an attorney, a property tax attorney, who's been working on property cases for specifically businesses, but there are some residential issues where we will do a settlement agreement or a payment in lieu of tax. So they make a payment directly to the school district, and then instead of going through the whole tax appeals process with the Board of Tax Appeals and the Board of Tax Revision. And so those payment in lieu of taxes came in. Again, we never anticipate those. We don't know when we would have a settlement. So they came in a little higher than we've had in the past few years. So we had some additional revenue there. Furthermore, our expenditures were down somewhat. We knew that with the 4 buildings closing and our new elementary coming online, we knew we were going to have some savings from attrition. We had a rehire agreement in place with our classified staff, and that allowed them to retire 2 years ago and work through the transition into the new building. Last year, so a little over a year ago, those staff members left, and we were able to contract our size a little bit as we didn't need all of the same staffing levels. And then we were also able to have staff in at a lower price point. So we knew we had those savings financially built in, but we projected those to be somewhere in the range of about $30.8 million for all of our salaries for administrative, classified, certified, exempt, all of the classifications. With the building closure, with not having overtime, extra time, with reductions in supplementals, club activities, that came in several $100,000 lower than what we had anticipated. Another big area that we're still trying to work out and get a good idea on is our purchase services came in significantly lower. Now, we did this past fiscal year 20, we did go through our books and clear out some open purchase orders that have been open for a couple of years that were tying up money but had not been used or not had a plan for. So that kind of reduced it a little bit artificially, but even with that, we still saw a reduction in our purchase services. Again, some of it is going to be due to the COVID piece where we had our buildings closed, utility costs were down as we weren't heating the buildings at the same level or cooling them at the same level because of the extended closure. And then also jumping back a little bit on the forecast with our insurance benefits, I project, and I've tried to be very upfront with the board, I project a 12% annual increase in our health insurance. That number really is an idea of a worst case scenario. It's a number that I've experienced within my career, but it doesn't happen often. And this past year, we were down to more around a 5%. So we have a little bit higher always built into our benefits because they can jump up pretty quickly on us. But all of that said, that really played a significant role for us as we came in with, we were expecting a deficit spend and we came in with our revenues over our expenditures. So instead of deficit spending, we were able to actually start banking more money into our general fund. So that, of course, affects our forecast and how we plan going forward. Now, I've adjusted our forecast again as a draft form. And some of those pieces that I've adjusted is when we look at this year's tax revenue, we're pulling it straight from the county, what they're certifying us at. And so what happens is the county certifies us at a little over $48 million in tax revenue for this fiscal year. Now, there is a disclaimer here because the part of that 48 million is homestead rollback and homestead exemption. If you remember, there's a homestead exemption in place for people who qualify typically over the age of 65 with some income basis, income levels in there as well, or exceptions as well. The state pays the first $25,000 of their home value, the taxes for them. Same thing with homestead rollback, and a residential property gets a 10% reduction and a owner occupied residential property gets a 12.5% reduction. So that 4.4 million is what we've typically seen in homestead rollback. So when we remove that 4.4 from the 48 million in tax revenue, we're expecting $43.8 million if we were to collect 100%. Now, based on the information, last year we had a collection rate of about 97, a little over 97%. This year, I'm asking that we would use a 96% collection rate. I think there's some uncertainty with how our collection rate will play out. We're already seeing some of this uncertainty. Normally, we get a distribution in June for the following year in advance for the upcoming fiscal year. We didn't see that this year. It was pushed off until July 15th. The July 15th payment was significantly less than we would normally see. So that's a little bit lower. We'll see what happens in the advance in August to give us a little bit of an idea of where those taxes are being paid. Remember, this 43.8 million at 100% or a little over 42 million at 96% includes both residential and commercial properties. And I know there have been some commercial properties that have throughout the country have stated that they're not paying their taxes or rent or things like that. There's been some arguments on that. But so we're looking at our revenue at about $42 million next year in tax revenue. Now, other pieces of the forecast that I'm looking at changing slightly is
Mr. Hopkins,
yes.
has the county treasurer given you any kind of guidance as to how collection efforts are going? I know it just started for the second half, or at least any feedback on how that first half?
So unfortunately, no, they have not yet. So we are hoping to, anticipating some of that information and hoping to get that in. But really with just in here in your payments being due in July, we're just starting to see it, and it will be a few months before we get a settlement report.
Thank you.
So then when we look at some of our expenditures, again, we had expected last year a $30.8 million in salaries. This year, I'm expecting it to go up 4% off of that expected 30.8. I'm at least not planning or forecasting for another extended school closure. So we would be at about $32 million in our personnel costs. I have reduced some of our benefit costs for this year. And the reason for that is we're, instead of using a 12% this year, I'm looking at using only a 5% increase this year. Now that'll be hammered out in August at our Suburban Health Consortium meeting. But based on initial information, it should be somewhere around that 5% number. We know, again, has been reported widely in the news, that people have not necessarily been using health insurance over the past 3 or 4 months. So that has reduced our costs in our insurance pool. So when we look at it all played out, we have our forecasting numbers. This year, we knew we were going to be deficit spending, and last year we were able to avoid that. A lot of that had to do with the extended school closure. This year, I'm not anticipating an extended school closure. I hope it doesn't happen again. So we are anticipating a deficit spend this year of several $1 million. The other thing that I want to point out to the board is when you look at those forecasts for this year, fiscal year 21, I'm not including any of the COVID-related costs. We know that we have sanitizer, cleaner, we might have dividers or masks or other type of face shields. We have some significant costs that we know that we're playing into. We do have some state funds coming from the state or federal government that may help offset some of those costs. But based on some of the initial numbers, or at least expectations, that could run into the $1 million plus or a couple $1 million costs as we've kind of worked through some of the numbers of trying to source these supplies and materials. So that will play into our forecasting. You know, it's just such an unknown that I'm unable to really put a number on it for you right now. So when we look at some of those other numbers, I think what I've tried to do for the board there, and I hopefully it's you're able to see it on the screen there, is I've kind of put together 8 different options. 4 of them for running a election this November, anywhere from starting at a 3.9 mil levy, then a 4.9, a 5.9, or a 6.9. So 4 options there. Again, if the board would like to see other numbers, I'm happy to work that out. Even on this call, we can, you know, kind of simulate some of those. I've also put together 4 more options that would be if the board would choose to run a campaign next year. So with the way school funding works, it doesn't matter when we pass a ballot issue within that calendar year. So if we pass it in May, or if we pass it in November, or if they would allow for a special election in February or August like they used to, any of those opportunities, if you pass, you start collecting the following January. So in this case, if we passed here in this November, we would start collecting this upcoming January. You'll see that would impact this fiscal year because January of 2021 is within our fiscal year. So we would get half of the total amount in this fiscal year, and then we'd start getting the full amount the following fiscal year. If we would choose not to run in this November, and let's say the board would opt to run in May, again, it doesn't matter if it's in May or November, we'll get it the following January. So in that case, we wouldn't get the first collection, which is a half of a collection, until January of 2022. So, you know, some of those, just again, some thoughts, some information for the board to consider as you start looking at these different numbers. I think that's most of the information that I wanted to get to the board here, and I'm happy to answer any and all of your questions. And like I said, I have access here on the computer to where we could try to simulate some different numbers if the board would choose to look at different numbers as well.
Thank you. And Mr. Hopkins, I know the Finance Committee, myself, and Mr. Finucane joined you some weeks ago to review some of these numbers, and we thank you for bringing these numbers to our attention again, and so that the board can engage in some conversation. I know that Mr. Finucane and our report to the board shared some of these numbers with the knowledge that Mr. Hopkins would then present some additional information with regard to these numbers and also potential levies. Our last operating levy we passed, if I'm not mistaken, was in 2006.
That's correct.
Okay. And as I look at your numbers as we move forward, we do move into deficit spending over the long term, and again, trying to continue to educate for excellence and making certain that the district remains very, very strong as we move forward. I know the board, we had a light discussion on potential levy and the dollar, not the dollar amount, but the millage amount that we might suggest. And we seem to spend a lot of time discussing this 5.9 mils. That it seemed to be right. It seemed to put the district in a good place for the long term, which would go beyond, I believe, our current terms as we're currently serving Westlake City Schools. As I look at it, these are tough times, and we've had some good conversations about that. These are tough and unusual times, and it does remind me of a tough time, say about 10 years ago. And about 10 years ago, roughly, we engaged in a project with the city of Westlake, and that project was to replace and refurbish all of our buildings, part of the 2020 vision plan that the community had come up with and really set us to task. And we were challenged at that time. There was a world financial crisis. The entire world financial system almost shut down to the point where we could have gone to swipe our cards at the gas station and we'd see no cash coming out. So it was a very tough and uncertain time. And I know at that time anyway, the city of Westlake said, move forward. These look like very, very tough times. There was a good lively discussion on the board at that particular time saying, gosh, we just don't know what is ahead of us, and is this the prudent thing to do? And here, roughly 10 years later, the city of Westlake, we're very fortunate to have a strong community, strong partnership with all citizens here in Westlake, and we were able to carry on that 2020 vision plan and really set the Westlake City Schools facilities really for the next, how many decades, 5, 6, 7, 8, really for a long period of time with those facilities. So as I continue here, I just think about the current situation, a lot of uncertainty, and I think it's important that we talk about our citizens that support us. It's a tough and unusual time as we look at the situation, just like that one. I believe that we'll move forward, and I would just like to continue to make certain that we're good stewards for the schools. And as I think about it, I think it's important that we, from a financial fiscal point of view, that responsibility to seriously consider putting an issue on the ballot. And I'm interested in any and all comments.
Joe, I'd like to begin. When we spoke about this, I believe it was January, February, and we talked about the 5.9, and I think that set us on the path. I was 100% behind it, and I thought it made a lot of sense. Not knowing what would occur in March of this year with the COVID crisis, I think putting a ballot, something on the ballot for this November would be callous and insensitive to our constituents. Many of them are suffering. As you know, unemployment's 11% and extremely high. I've talked to many people who've had pay cuts as high as 50%. they're not able to travel, they're not able to work in the office. They're burdened with additional, maybe students at home. So that's one thing I wanted to bring about. The other thing is when we've attended the OSBA conference, the Ohio School Board Association conference, several times over the last several years, one of the things that we went to many presentations about levies, and everyone told us the minimum amount of time you need is at least 9 months, but preferably a year. We're a little bit more, we're somewhere between 3 and 4 months out. I'm not sure, given the situation that, that we have the time to put together a successful campaign. If we want something on the ballot, we want it to pass. And I just don't know whether we have the time available and even the resources. I mean, you're not going to be doing a door-to-door campaign. How are we going to conduct the campaign? And like I said, I'm all for the levy, but I just think that the timing would be better served if we did it, sometime next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I go?
Yes.
Okay. I echo Bob's points because I was all in favor last time we talked about it of, doing it this November and going from Lynette Shuley, who has a beauty salon. She has, I believe, 3 children in our school system, and she has been a very ardent supporter. I think a couple of years ago, she sponsored the one Demon Spaghetti Dinner. Well, she just had to close down her shop today, and I am so saddened to hear it, first of all, because that's where I went for my pedicures, and I'm like lost now. Where am I going to go? But most of all kidding aside, I feel so sorry for her. This is a small business owner trying to make a go of it, and she had to close down today. And so I echo what Bob said. There's no way that I would feel comfortable putting a levy on this fall when people are in the situations that they are. However, I do think that we should advertise that fact a little bit and maybe send something out to the newspapers or whatever saying, hey, we do need the money. And I mean, I don't doubt that the school system needs the money, but the timing just isn't right. So I would hope that in the future, when we do put a levy on it, that people would choose to support us. So, maybe we could put a statement out to that regards or something.
We could do that.
So here's and somebody who deals with the restaurant and bar industry, I completely am in agreement. I am very concerned about what's going on in economic conditions now. And let's be frank, we have no idea what it's going to look like this fall. There's a lot of concern with that. We have no idea what the school year is going to look like. There's a lot of, I'm hearing from parents every day. There's a lot of concern about those things. On the flip side, I am going to make the comment that we're not going to see higher voter turnout for another 4 years at the earliest. The other part is, and I do fully understand we're not going to be able to run a traditional campaign because you can't really do door to door. The levy campaign can't really necessarily do fundraising, and the account's pretty lean right now. So we would have to run a very, very lean campaign. Maybe a postcard or 2. We'd have to do some real thought about it. Not necessarily having those town hall conversations. It would have to be a little bit more virtual. But fundamentally, the biggest issue is always voter turnout. And we're not going to see better voter turnout. Also, most people are already, there's, I want to say 650 roughly vote by mail applications already in for Westlake. So you're going to see a huge vote by mail push versus voting in person. So I'll be honest, this is a catch-22 where if we go now, I think there's a ton of risk because we don't necessarily know what November is going to look like. But at the same time, if we wait until next year, we might even have to ask for more money, like 6.9, just based off of the projections. So it's not a definitive yes or no, but I think there's 2 sides to this coin that we need to talk about a little bit.
Sure. Sure.
Can you hear me over my mask? Oh, okay. Good. Well, I hear and echo a lot of comments that my fellow board members have had. And Mr. Kraft will tell you that we did talk at length with Mr. Goggin, Dr. Goggin, and Mr. Hopkins about this in the Finance Committee. And we've looked at a lot of the forecasts where we're at today and where we're looking at into the future. And this is a conversation that I know we've had leading up to even a year ago. You know, we've said and we've talked about, you know, we're probably going to have to do one soon. We're probably going to have to do one soon. And a lot of times it's a timing issue. And I think as Liz had indicated, timing as it relates to a presidential election is usually one of the better opportunities to put a school levy on, because most of the people who do vote do tend to lean towards very positive toward the schools. Being considerate of what's happening right now in the society with COVID, it's an unfortunate situation and how it's impacting many people. I can definitely empathize with what's going on, but at the same time, this was an issue that predated COVID. It's going to be an issue that's going to be here after COVID. It's not going to go away. The one thing we do know for sure, we are going to have extra costs in this year's budget for COVID related to keep the students, to keep the teachers, the staff, everyone as safe as possible, being able to invest in the resources and the technology, you know, to make sure we have the distance learning at a level that meets students and teachers and parents' expectations. So I would say that there's never a perfect time for any of these types of decisions. And sometimes you just have to go with what you seem to think is a very good decision for the right time. It's maybe not the best time. The dollar amount is maybe something that, you know, could have further discussions. I know we've talked in the past about the 6-9, the 5-9, the 4-9. And I am very conscious of what those dollars mean down to the month level for a typical Westlake resident. And if you look at a 4.9, it gives us the ability to continue to build up our reserves, lessen the dollar amounts associated with burning through those reserves and running a deficit. But the average homeowner is only going to pay a little over $40 on a monthly basis. So it's going to be, again, under $500 for a given year. And this gives a little bit of empathy to what's going on out there into the society right now. The difference, as Mr. Hopkins had indicated, between a mill is $100 a year. So right now a 4.9 would be $490. 5.9 would be $590, and $690 for a 6. So I mean, the forecast that Mr. Hopkins has put together, they lay out a very good opportunity for us to see what things and what the dollar amounts will be out 4, 5, 6 years from now. Although I think if we had not be going through what we are right now with COVID, I would probably suggest that we go with a 5.9 or a 6.9. But being empathetic and listening to what is going out there with people in their situations, I would say that we scale it down. But at the same time, it's one of those things that there's never going to be a good time. And this is a problem, and this is an issue that we addressed even over a year ago. It's not going to go away. So we're going to have to address it. And the best time to address it is in a presidential election year. So I would be in support of moving forward with it. I would be open to a lot more discussion if everyone's in consensus on that as to the dollar amount. But I'll leave my comments there.
If I may, the board seems very much in agreement that if these were, the board seems very much in agreement that we need this. Am I wrong?
No, you're right.
Okay. And if times may have been different, maybe we'd be talking again, working hard on a campaign for November. So I understand that, and I think the ongoing conversation is good. Several months ago, and Dr. Stoll touched on it, that we seem to be in agreement on a 5.9, and Mr. Finucane brings up, well, if times are tough, do we scale that back? And I think it's worthwhile having the conversation. If we're all in agreement that we know we need this, does it make sense to, if it's a tough time, to scale it back and to engage, say, in a 3.9 or a 4.9? If I can build on that conversation and touch on some of the points that my good board members have brought up, timing. It's an unusual time. November is a short time away. The catch-22 that was brought up. As I think about, and I think every board member has brought this up, and both, well, Mr. Hopkins has brought up as well, is the unknown cost when it comes to COVID. Does that not, push us even harder to potentially put something on the ballot? I think about our superintendent and our administrators have been working very, very hard along with our staff to really put together a very thoughtful education program as we head into the fall, to not only be very robust, but also to keep people safe and to really provide activities for all of our students, and other programs as well, to make certain that our staff feels safe, all of those types of things. And again, we've listened to the people that we serve, and these plans, we're going to hear more about them, Dr. Goggin, I know, in just a few minutes. But does that not push us even more so to potentially put something on the ballot? Everything that you mentioned is true. Everything you mentioned is true. And I know I made this analogy to the Great Recession. And with the Great Recession, you're right. There's unemployment now, there's unemployment then. It was not unusual for me to be on the sidelines of a baseball game or a soccer game. And I kid you not, about 1 out of every 10 people I knew, they'd come up to me and they'd say, "Joe, here's my resume, I'm looking for work." And it happened. It happened. And I realized that there is unemployment now, but as I gather all that financial information, I look at it literally every day, from the likes of Strategas and Baird and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, all of those. And you're right, the unemployment numbers are high, but is it a little different this time? Is it a little different? And by different, I mean bad, but is it as bad? Those folks that are out of work, is it permanent or is it temporary? 10 years ago, it was permanent. Many folks have permanent unemployment now. Many folks, it seemed to be temporary. Yes, lots of folks are not going into the office, but thank God for technology, because we're able to continue in different ways with the technology that's in front of all of us. Those are some other thoughts I have, and I just wonder if this discussion brings us to not just to not put it on, but do we absolutely have to put it on?
I prefer to see a couple things. One, I mean, we don't know costs. I am encouraged by what I've seen in the vaccine trials. Several companies have started phase 3, which is the final phase. It takes 3 months or so of testing, but it looks promising. And I think once that happens, I think we'll see the economy rip roaring back. That V shape that they talk about. I would prefer to delay it and even go with a 6.9, next year when things are in a much better shape. And I think that's my look. I mean, I know, we need it. We all look at the 5-year forecast. It does go to deficit spending. We definitely need it. The question is, when do we do it? Do we have enough time? And I'm not so sure that just because you have a high turnout for presidential election, that's a given that it's going to pass. That to me, in normal times, I might say yes. This time it might be counterintuitive. So just some thoughts thrown out.
Other thoughts?
I totally agree with Mr. Stoll. We want to do this right. I don't feel that we've had planning. We don't even have a committee together. It would just be a, willy-nilly type of campaign, and I don't want to do that. I want to be well prepared and give out all the information that we have to our community. I don't want to go with a 3-9 now and then find out that it wasn't enough and have to come back in another year or two if it would pass. And I agree with Bob that just because it's a presidential election doesn't mean that people are going to go for it. In fact, it may be the reverse. They may be so despondent about everything that they're very negative and just no on things. That happens too. And John said, well, if we do what, a 4.9, it's $490 a year only, but that only $490 a year is very important to some people. So I don't feel now is the right time to do it. Even if we say, oh, well, it's only going to raise your taxes $40 a month. Well, that $40 a month could be buying food for their family. So I'm not in favor of putting it on the ballot at this time.
Thank you.
Well,
Other
I can say that there are, as we all know, there's a lot of unknowns. I would hate to all of a sudden be sitting here 6 months from now and we're still shut down. I would hate to be here and be saying, I wish we had some extra money to spend towards distance learning or a more robust educational delivering platform for distance learning. We have absolutely no idea if we go into the fall, into the winter, into the spring, if we're not going to have a repeat or even worse than what we experienced. We have no idea. Bob's right. There's promising opportunities out there with vaccines and treatments and things like that. They're promising. There's no more of a guarantee that that'll happen or that we won't have any more excessive breakouts or a repeat of what we experienced in the spring. So for me, my concern is we wait, we're doing ourselves a disservice. We're going to be eating into our reserves that much faster out into the future. And we're going to burn through them that much faster because we're going to need to be able to provide the services that our parents and our students and our teachers need to be able to continue on the educational process that we want to have for them, whatever that is, whether it's in person, whether it's not in person, whatever it is, we need to be able to be ready to have the resources for that. And yes, there's no better time. There's not a worse time or a better time. We've been talking about this. Throw the COVID out the window. This is something that's going to be here 6 months from now, a year from now. Forget COVID. If anything, COVID is going to make us need more resources going down the road. So why delay that decision? We're already, if we delay, we're making a bigger hole into the future because we have no idea what our unknowns are as relates to COVID expenses. And that's the thing that scares me, because our job is to make sure that we have the resources to be able to provide the education that the community expects from us, whether it's in person, partially in person, or completely virtual. And that's what I'm afraid that down the road, we might not have that. We just don't know. Who would have thought that we would be the kids would be out from March till the end of the year. Who knows if they'll even go back based on how things could progress in the next, say, month. So we have to plan for all potential contingencies as relates to resources that are available. We might need more substitutes. We might need a lot more support staff. We have no idea until we start to get into it. We won't know what we really need until it's been 2 or 3 years from now. In 3 years, we look back and we'll be like, well, we should have done this, this, and this. In 3 years, I'd like to think we look back and we would say, hey, we made the right decision. We invested, we asked the electorate for an increase. It wasn't the best time, but it was the best decision. Because here we are 3 years later, and this is the financial situation that we're in. And had we not done that, maybe we would be cutting a variety of different things associated with the schools. So I do understand wanting to be able to delay it, but it's just going to delay the inevitable, no matter what.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Could I add, Liz, you sent us out something several weeks ago from some organization or something saying that it didn't look like a good time for school levies. Do you remember that? Or are you aware of any talk that's going on about timing of school levies now?
I haven't gotten any updates. I know there was going to be some polling being done during the month of July, and I haven't heard of any new information about that. I will say Fairview's voted to go to the ballot. Cleveland's going, City of Cleveland schools are on the ballot. Trying to remember who else, but there's a number of issues that are going to be on the ballot this fall. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of unknowns about this, and that's in a lot of risk about it, but I am very concerned about the financials of our residents in the city, but at the same time, I mean, it's, you know, this might be one of those where it's a lot of risk, but at the same time, I think that if we delay, we are going to have to come back even higher. And fundamentally, the hardest part is with any of these levy campaigns is getting people to show up to the ballot.
Thank you. Other thoughts? I'm going to get right back on the topic, but I want to say I do appreciate the board members and also Dr. Gog and Mr. Hopkins for being in the boardroom tonight. And we can hear you pretty well through your masks. And so thank you for being there and participating. Again, what I'm hearing is we have a timing issue. We certainly do not want to, I never want to insult the people that we serve, and putting something on the ballot surely is not my intent to insult anyone by pushing something on the ballot with just a short period of time. I just see the need, and there just seems to be some, I don't believe we're on the same page when it comes to millage. I think if we take a step back, say at 3.9, I just see us going back on the ballot sometime soon. I guess sooner. I'm listening to Dr. Stoll suggesting, if we don't go this time, maybe we go with a 6.9 in the future. So again, I realize the timing is difficult. We're in unusual times, of course. The last thing I want to do is insult the people that we serve. And I have a tough time going with less than 5.9. Other thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple.
Yeah.
A couple more. When you think about what the role is of the school board, it comes back to helping set, guidance for what the community wants in the way of education, and we hire professionals like Dr. Goggin and Mr. Hopkins to execute that, and they do a great job. If something happens, they come to us and say, hey, we need more resources to be able to execute the plans that you want for the district. And that's our job then to go back to the electorate and ask for that and justify it by saying, the community, this is what you want, and this is what we want to deliver, and this is going to cost us, and we need a little bit more resources. Our job is to think long-term. I'm extremely empathetic of what's going on in society with COVID. But we have to think long-term. We can't think, 6 months, a year. We've talked about this. This is not a new topic. We've talked about this for well over a year, probably even more than that. We said, hey, we're going to have to do this. We're going to have to do this, and unfortunately, things kind of got away from us because of COVID and everything that's associated with the spring. But it still didn't eliminate the need that we need to do this. I mean, we were all in agreement that, yes, we need to do this. And I think even before COVID, we were all in agreement that says, yeah, November would probably be the best thing to do it. Because that's a long-term look that we're taking for the district. Mr. Hopkins lays out the long-term. He puts it out there in very clear, black and white. I don't want to say forget COVID, but think about what our obligations are to the students and to the community here. That's what I'm asking, is that make that decision. What the dollar amount is, we can discuss that based on forecasts and projections. But we already made that decision before, that it made sense to go forward this November. I'm sorry, that's a strategic decision we made as a board, or I should say a consensus we had. There was no decision. We made a consensus, or had a consensus, that made sense for us to do. Because we are looking long-term for the district. That's why we have the 5-year forecast, so we can see out into the future financially what potentially happened. And now we have this huge unknown with COVID, which is going to potentially put another $500,000 to maybe $2 million of unknown expenses into our pocket just this year, and God knows what's going to happen next year. So I guess I'm just hoping that my fellow board members will reconsider the premise of going forward this November, because again, never a good time, but we already had said, yes, it makes sense for us to do it. If COVID wasn't here, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We'd probably be having a conversation as to what is the level that we think would be a balance between what we need for the district to provide the services to the electorate and what the electorate would feel as though is valuable enough for the school district.
And John, I agree with you, but I'm only talking 6 months delay. I'm talking like a next May. And if we made the decision now, it gives us time to put together a committee and a campaign. I mean, we're running short on time. If regardless of COVID, if we made the decision now, it's very late in the process. I mean, I think, there's 3.5 months, Todd, somewhere in there before the election. So that's my other concern, is it's one thing to put it on, but I mean, we just don't want to put it on. We want it to pass if we put it on. And with a campaign that's, like Barb said, there's no committee. Who's gonna run this thing, and how's it gonna work? And that's the other thing that I'm concerned of. We don't want what happened last time, where we had 3 failures in a row. So if you put it on, you want to do it right and get it passed. And that's my concern.
Well, no, and those are truly valid points. My fear again is you wait, and who knows what the future is going to be in 6 months. It could be a 100% disaster from where we're at right now. It could be a culmination of COVID-2 or COVID continued, and a combination with the influenza season. We have no idea. And then we're gonna be sitting here in 6 months saying, oh my God, the economy is in even worse shape. Or there's a potential for the economy to be even in worse shape. And then there's another reason 6 months later. There's another reason 6 months later. These are never easy decisions that we're asked to make. That's why we're elected. to make these decisions. And if people don't like our decisions, then they vote us out of office. But at the end of the day, this is what our job is. You know, it's to make the resources available so that Dr. Goggin and Mr. Hopkins can run the district and fulfill the mission that we've all put together, the people before us, so that it can continue for the students. I can't even understand why would we delay when we've already decided before this whole COVID thing started, we needed to do it.
And my answer would be because COVID is here. And I know that my family, my neighbors, my husband and I have had many discussions. And most of the time we agree that we just have to take this situation a day at a time. And to be honest with you, and we've all said it, we have no idea what's going to happen, 6 months from now. But I honestly can't stress myself out and worry about that now, because we're still taking this a day at a time. And I can't in good conscience put it on the ballot, ask for more money when I know of so many people who are out of work. And maybe it's because, and you all know that I work, I'm president of our St. Vincent de Paul Society at my church. And we get calls from people that need food, that need help with their utilities, with their rent. And it's a very real thing, even here in Westlake. I mean, we're serving the people of Westlake. And maybe that need is, has touched me closer because I'm involved with that. But I probably pushed having this levy on more than everybody, but I do want time to plan it. I want at least 6 or 7 months. I mean, I'd love to have a year to get this committee going and have some fundraisers, but I do believe that 3 months is not enough time to get people together, to get organized, to get your plan. As Bob said, we want it to pass. So I know what you're saying, John, and you're correct. But right now, I'm taking it a day at a time to get through this.
Mr. Hopkins?
I just want to say I'm hearing obviously the concerns from different board members, and you each have valid concerns. But I do want to point out, because if there is some split on the board, is if the board would vote tonight, it would require 3 out of the 5 of you to vote positively or affirmatively in order for it to pass. But the next issue, or the next resolution, that would be approximately a week from tonight, would be the plan, would require 4 out of 5 of you by law. So, if there are those concerns with more than one board member, which currently that's what I'm hearing, and that's just as I'm,
Right.
listening to this, it may be best to wait, just because you need to have, you'd have to have 4 of you to vote yes on that next week. So I just want to throw that out there to make sure we understand, the requirements for this resolution, but also the next resolution.
Right. And I know the process typically that would be in place is strategic planning, which I know Dr. Goggin is very involved in that process. And of course, with COVID coming on, that process always continues, but it's taken just a different path. And as I think about that with, say, a look into the future, Dr. Goggin, any idea as far as a strategic plan with, say, a campaign for a levy as a part of that? Do you have an idea timeline-wise when you would see such a planning really being carried out in earnest?
Yeah, we want to. So we were in the middle of our profile of a lifelong learner, and I think some of you are involved in that. And we had developed our model for the lifelong learner, and we're getting ready to take it on the road to show it to people. And then when we agreed upon what the profile looked like, to build action steps or a strategic plan based on that profile. Now, we did pause that, so when we start the year, we do want to start up that profile again. Like I said, the work is done with it, but we'll just be getting feedback from the community and stakeholders. And in regard to, now obviously the strategic planning would be different because that is district funded, and then any levy campaign would be separate, but obviously the information generated can be used by the levy campaign. But I would anticipate starting up our Portrait of a Lifelong Learner as we start our school year.
Thank you.
Sure.
We've had a lot of discussion. As we move forward, I don't anticipate a motion, but there may be a motion out there that one of the board members would like to make.
Well, I would, again, all of my board members are making a lot of the same points, and I think we're all in agreement of the overarching that we do need to do it. I think that is an overarching consensus amongst everybody, plain and simple. So I look at that as a very positive. It comes back to timing now is the one hurdle that there seems to be a little dissension among. And there may even be some dissension on the dollar amount. But I don't think that seems to be as much of an issue as it is more of the timing. And as you all know, I could probably go on all night talking, but there's so many unknowns in the future that I really don't know if things will be better in 6 months or better than what they are. So I don't know if we'll be able to ever do in-person fundraisers. I don't know if we'll ever be able to go door to door, or if we do door to door, people aren't going to answer the door. I mean, so there are so many unknowns now because the world's been turned upside down. We just don't know. We do know one thing. We need money down the road for this school district, just from what our plans were currently out into the future. That's not even including potentially what things we may be faced with. And the COVID is a wake-up call probably to all school districts, in that they were probably caught flat-footed on what to do. This is an opportunity for us to make sure that we're not flat-footed. We don't have the resources, say, in 3 or 4 years, because we're going to spend them all in the next year or two. Timing is never going to be perfect. We're all in consensus that we need to do it. Would it be the best campaign? No. Is there always going to be an opportunity to make it better? Absolutely. In the words of a mighty person that I know, progress, not perfection. We make progress towards it. Many of levies fail, and then they go back on the year later, or they go back on a year later. I'm not saying that I want that to happen. What I am saying is it comes back to timing. We all agreed that it's something we need. We're disagreeing now on just timing. And it's only the reason we're disagreeing on it is because of COVID. Understanding being empathetic about COVID, but you have to think long-term for the district. If this is the first time we were talking about a levy, I would be like, sure. But we've been talking about it before Liz got on. We've been talking about it for a few years. In 6 months, I'm afraid someone else is going to be on the board and say, you know what, we shouldn't do it because of X, Y, or Z. The consensus is to do it. It's the when. You know, and I'm not hearing a very solid reason not to go, other than we may not be able to put our best foot forward in the next 3 or 4 months, which we might not be able to, or we might be able to, but we won't know until we try. So I guess that's the only thing I'm saying is give us the ability to try, put it on And if we can make it, we can make it. There's no guarantee that any levy, when it gets on, is going to pass. But you don't know unless you try. Like the kid at the baseball field. He strikes out looking. He'll never know if he's going to be able to get the first base unless he tries to swing. I'm asking you, we take a swing this fall and try to do it. If we delay it, we're just going to come up with another excuse in 6 months to delay it again. We all agree we want it and we need it. It's just a timing thing. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Before we do a formal motion, if somebody is going to move it, could we just take a casual straw poll and see who would be voting for it or against it? Is that allowed?
No, you generally want to avoid straw polls.
Okay.
You know, if there's a motion and a second, that would move to a vote at that point.
Mhm. And Mr. Fanouken, what would that millage be?
Well, at this point, I think we are capable of changing the millage if at a second vote. Is that correct?
I believe it is because we asked for a certification, but it's typically you would not want to. We want to look at having a vote tonight.
Hey, Todd, you're muted.
I'm sorry, thank you. Can you mute your Sean? So Mr. Fanouken asked if the millage could change. So typically we would not want to change the millage from one vote to the other. Although I believe you can, because this first vote is asking the county to certify what amount it would create. But we typically would not want to change it. We'd want to have a vote on the millage tonight, and then next week would be a vote on putting it on the ballot itself.
Okay.
So to the board, I don't know if any decisions would change to move it forward to another meeting just to continue the conversation, or not hypothetically, should we pass something tonight? Any thoughts?
I think we need to make a decision instead of, continuing it on.
I understand. And do your thoughts on that, Mrs. Lozinski, do they change at all?
No.
Dr. Stoll,
No,
any thoughts? Okay,
Are you taking a straw vote?
I am not.
no, we're not
Oh.
taking a straw vote, but I think,
It almost sounded like, is it? I'll just make a motion
I'm just
and
interested.
then we can.
okay,
So I'd like to make a motion that the Westlake City School Board puts on this November a operating levy of 4.9 mils to be voted on by the electors this November.
And I'll
So,
second.
Mr. President, I'm assuming that the actual motion that Mr. Fanouken is making is for a resolution declaring it necessary to levy an additional tax for the purposes of current expenses and requesting the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer to certify the total current tax valuation of the school district and the dollar amount of revenue that would be generated by that additional levy pursuant to sections 570503 and 570521 of the Ohio Revised Code, and it would be at 4.9 mils. And my understanding is you are seconding that, Mr. Kraft?
I'm sorry, that's exactly what I was thinking, Mr. Hopkins. Thank you.
Discussion.
I think we've discussed enough.
Okay. And I think it warrants being brought to a vote. I've shared my opinions with you. I hear from my fellow board members who are very in touch and in tune with their community. Some very thoughtful comments tonight that our constituents are having a tough time. It's a tough economy. It's tough on jobs. It's tough on income. Mr. Fanouken, I hear you loud and clear. Is there going to be a better time or not? I know we have excellent stewards on the board and from administration and from our entire staff. And I know that we're going to get through this. I'd like to see it on the ballot in November. But again, listening to my fellow board members, asking me to really be certain that I'm in touch with my community, I'm having a tough time voting yes. Other thoughts?
I concur.
Again, I would just reiterate that we all said we needed to do this. It's just that simple. We all agreed we needed to do it. So if you take the COVID out of the equation, we'd be voting 5-0 right now.
Right, but we can't take it out of the equation because it's very much with us. And my own personal opinion is I don't think 4.9 is the correct millage for us either, so.
Oh, I'd be more than happy to make an amendment to that.
Won't change my vote.
But it can be in the record.
Other thoughts? Further discussion?
Is there a mill levy that you wanted to express?
Who, me?
Yes, Mark.
Well, first of all, there is no good time to ask people to raise taxes
That
at
is
all.
correct.
So I mean,
Agreed. We all agree.
right. I think most of us were leaning towards the 5.9. I'm just afraid that if we went lower, we're going to need to come back sooner to the community and ask for more. And I don't want to do that because Bob mentioned earlier, we look callous, I don't know what we look like, but I don't want to keep coming back. I mean, it's been, 14 years since one passed, so.
Yes. I'd be more than happy to amend my motion if I can get a second.
I don't believe that's going to solve anything.
No, but it would give us a little bit better perspective and understanding of where we're standing, especially because I think if there's 3 issues we're dealing with here tonight. Do we put a ballot on, an issue on the ballot? When do we do it, and what's the dollar amount? We all agreed we know we need to do it.
Right.
There's consensus there. There's not consensus as it relates to the when. I would love to be able to at least have a consensus as to what the millage would be. And then we can address that in another week after we take this vote tonight, assuming there is a need for another vote. So I am asking if anybody wants to second my motion to amend my original motion of a 4.9 to change it to a 5.9.
Is there a second? Further discussion? Roll call?
All right, for the original resolution of declaring it necessary for a levy for the additional tax for the purpose of current expenses. At 4.9 mils, Fanouken,
Yes.
Kraft,
No.
Lizinski,
No.
Kieran, Dole. Dr. Stoll?
No.
So for the record, I had Mr. Fanouken as yes, Mr. Kraft, Ms. Lizinski, Ms. Piernat, and Dr. Stoll as no. Motion does not carry.
We have further recommendations from our superintendent.
I do. I have a couple items on here really quickly. One is a resolution to approve a couple contracts for our extended school year, and it's North Coast Therapy and Lakeshore Speech. The contracts are attached. They are for services provided for extended year students. And the other resolution is to approve a revised calendar. This is something that we did discuss in our last meeting. And if you do look at it, the only change in the calendar is moving the start date. And so the difference would be first quarter would be 6 days shorter than the other 3 quarters. It's not a very disproportionate change. We didn't feel that amount of days was would warrant changing everything else, whether it becomes holiday breaks or end of the school year. We are good when it comes to the hours that are required for the state of Ohio. There are forms that we were able to submit this year for a distance learning plan that will take care of any hours we would be off. So that was my proposal, to keep it simple and just move it move the start of school after Labor Day and keep the rest of the calendar the same.
Is there a motion to approve superintendent's recommendations for A and B?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Moved by Stoll, seconded by Lazinski. Stoll,
Yes.
Lazinski,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Pier not.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Are there any further board comments or items?
Where's Jack when you need him?
Further comments or items?
I have one quick comment before, I know Dr. Goggins got to get onto the town hall. And the one big comment I have, especially because I'm not sure how many people we have listening right now, but we had a lot of people about it last week. I think people need to keep in mind, everyone needs to keep in mind kindness and compassion, because there's a lot of very, very tough decisions going on that the staff are making and that parents are making that are going to impact their families. So
Thank you.
that's just one thing I would like to remind everybody, is some kindness and compassion.
Right on. Further comments? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
To adjourn at 6:25 PM. Pier not.
Yes.
Lazinski,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right.